Since the earliest cavemen looked up at the sky, people have been seduced by space. Even today, its awesome majesty and sheer beauty continue to attract followers. Only now they've traded their caves for sheds. Inside these makeshift structures is the world of the amateur astronomer. Behind these doors are a band of people separated by age, background and skill, yet united by one thing: their love of the heavens.
When I was 11, I joined the British Astronomical Association, and so I thought one day I'm going to have a big telescope and contribute. And about 4 years later, when I was 15, I actually built my own telescope and started making observations.
You can see all these galaxies, planets in books, but I still rather look through a telescope and see the actual thing, see the light from this object going directly after perhaps travelling for millions of miles through space, coming directly, going right into my eye.
Sun's still shining.
There is an aesthetic side to astronomy. I mean, the very beauty of the night sky. To go out and look at lunar observations, for example, the moon is a very beautiful place when you look at it. So I think about that. I think about the footprints of the astronauts that are still there.
I'm really not quite certain what the fundamental drive is. It's just that it's quite important to know, quite important to be certain, quite important to see that there is a big universe out there.
But is there more to amateur astronomy than simply stargazing? How important are these unpaid part-timers in unravelling the secrets of the universe? Astronomy has never failed to pull the crowds. In fact, some events happen so rarely, like the transit of Venus between the Earth and the Sun, that if you miss it, you're unlikely to see it again in your lifetime. For most of us, this is as close to astronomy as we get. But for a small group of enthusiasts, it's only the tip of the iceberg.
An amateur astronomer is somebody who loves astronomy. I mean, the word amateur means amour, it means to love. And they are passionate about astronomy. They live in this sort of twilight world. They have their own day jobs, but what they're living for is to look at the stars at night.
There are more than 40,000 amateur astronomers in Britain today, looking at everything from planets to variable stars and supernovae. Some observe for fun, while for others it's a full-time hobby. But what unites them in this twilight world is a common interest which can be traced back to their childhood.
In 1957, Brook Bond-T produced 50 outer space cards. And I was 9 years old at the time, and I spotted them and I fell in love. Those 50 cards, oh God, my family must have drunk tea till we were kind of orange. Because you could never, it was always the same when you collected cards, you could never get all of them. You know, you always ended up with 15 Venuses and no Jupiter or something like that. But we drank away and bought lots of tea, and I filled up a little album that you could get free if you sent off for it. But they were very informative, and even if I close my eyes now, I can picture the exact shade of Jupiter on one of the cards. I think it was number 9 with all the planets on it. Jupiter was purple, as I recall. And I was just astonished that all this stuff was known about and written down, and that began a lifelong interest.
The 1957 Brook Bond-T cards signalled a revival of interest in astronomy that had waned during the two world wars. Several national and international events also swelled this tide of enthusiasm by bringing space into people's homes.
This first satellite was today successfully launched in the USSR.
Until 2 days ago, that sound had never been heard on this Earth.
Suddenly, it has become as much a part of 20th century life as the whir of your vacuum cleaner. It's a report from man's farthest frontier, the radio signal transmitted by the Soviet Sputnik, the first man-made satellite as it passed over New York earlier today.
The launch of Sputnik in 1957 heralded the start of the space race, which turned the sky into a new political playground for the Russians and Americans. It also turned everyone's eyes heavenwards for the first time since the war.
There's no doubt there was a space race. The Russians and the Americans were trying to beat each other, and the space race did boost space research along, and therefore astronomy well. And that's where, in a way, I come into the story.
The start of Patrick Moore's landmark TV series The Sky at Night in 1957 coincided with this new fascination with space. So popular was it that it turned him into a household name and opened up the world of astronomy to a wider public.
Good evening. Well, this is the 50th Sky at Night. We began the series way back in April 1957, and look how much has happened since then. In those days, space research was still at a very early stage. Well, since we've had the Sputniks, we've had the American Earth satellites, we've had the planetary probes, and of course we've had the first men in space. But as well as that, we've had a lot happening too on the purely astronomical field. We've had several bright comets, and we've had a close approach of Mars, and of course we've had the total eclipse of the sun last February, which we were able to televise direct.
We didn't have a television until I was about 10, but yes, then I started watching Patrick Moore's Sky at Night, and already he gave the impression of having been around describing the universe since the Big Bang. To me and to hundreds of thousands of others, you know, he was the voice of the universe.
There is definitely a lightning over there now, George. Can you see it? It's coming out. Yes, there is the moon. I can see it for the moment. No, it's gone again.
It's gone. However,
absolutely infuriating, and there's nothing one can do.
People don't watch The Sky at Night for the astronomy, they watch it for Patrick, for goodness sake. He is the quintessential amateur astronomer. He loves astronomy. He's got his telescopes in his garden and all that kind of thing. He loves telescopes and cats. And he's been, you know, he's so influential.
One thing we want to try and do is to make a complex subject look simple. Well, I try and do that. Others do it better than I can, but I try and do that. Also in The Sky at Night, we mix things up. Some programs are far more abstruse than others. And after all, you know, astronomy now is such a vast subject, no one can cover it all. And your astronomer who's researching on distant galaxies may not know much about the atmosphere of Mars. Therefore, we're watched by people of all kinds, I think, professional and amateurs, and all ages, from 6 to 90.
Armed with Patrick's know-how, the public's interest in astronomy grew rapidly through the 60s as astronauts broke through new frontiers in space.
I think for anyone who wasn't older than about, say, 7 or 8 in 1969, they've really missed what an incredible era that was, because you went in the state of a few days from landing a man on the moon being total science fiction to it being science fact.
I'm going to step off the limb. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
When Neil Armstrong stepped out onto the moon, it was one of the defining moments of the decade.
You're going too fast on the panorama suite. You're going to have to
And British audiences were treated to a first-hand account when Patrick Moore interviewed Armstrong on his return to Earth.
Mr. Armstrong, you're one of the very, very few people, I think, whose opinion on this is really worth having. In fact, there are only 4 of you. I do realise that when you were on the moon, you had very little time for gazing upwards. But could you tell us something about what the sky actually looks like from the moon, the sun, the earth, the stars, if any, and so on?
the sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon. The Earth is the only visible object other than the sun that can be seen, although there have been some reports of seeing planets. I myself did not see planets from the surface, but I suspect they might be visible. The Earth is quite beautiful from space and from the moon. It looks quite small and quite remote, but it's very blue and covered with white lace of the clouds, and the continents are clearly seen, although they have very little color from that distance.
Interviews like this proved so popular that Patrick Moore succeeded in wooing a new, young audience of would-be astronomers.
I was always interested in rockets and space, even as far back as I can remember, probably to about 5 or 6. But it was when I was 10 in 1968 that I picked up a friend's copy of the Observer's Book of Astronomy by Patrick Moore. And for the first time I saw pictures in that book that were actually of telescopes that were bigger than high street telescopes, but not as big as professional telescopes on mountains. I suddenly realised that there were people in their back gardens doing real astronomy that was of use. And so from that moment on, I think I was pretty much hooked.
You know, I'm asked many times every week how one starts taking up astronomy as a hobby, and I always give the same answer. You don't, in fact, need any optical equipment whatsoever, and you certainly don't need a large and expensive telescope. And my advice is that if you want to start taking a real interest in astronomy, the very first step is to buy a star map, which only costs a shilling or two, and then go out and learn your way around the sky. Of course, one thing one's got to bear in mind straight away is the question of cost. If one's only got a very limited amount of money to spend on equipment, and this certainly applies to most of us, then there's a straightforward choice between a very small telescope or a pair of binoculars.
As it happens, one amateur at the time was already showing you didn't even need a pair of binoculars to make a discovery.
It was in this homemade observatory in his back garden that Graham Hosty was keeping a routine check on the stars, as he's done almost nightly for the last 10 years, using the most primitive of astronomical equipment, half an old pair of binoculars, when he spotted something new. Within seconds, he realised it was a hitherto undiscovered nova star, and was just able to record his findings before it disappeared behind the nearby rooftops.
The amateur's tireless commitment to patrolling the skies in all weathers was one of the driving forces behind this tradition. The national passion for making things was another.
The English tradition is deeply pragmatic. It's the product of people who not only wanted to know the structure of the universe, where it came from, how it was made, but had a fascination with the nuts and bolts of instruments. How do I make a bigger telescope, a more stable telescope? It's not a speculative tradition. It's not a tradition which is driven by woolly thinking. It's very, very much of a hands-on tradition.
My grandfather used to work at Land's End Radio, and being out there on night duty, he got bored looking out at nothing across the sea, so he made a telescope. And my father made telescopes from all the bits, and I used to make telescopes, and then it led on from there. And in fact, some of the bits of the telescope are actually there now on this bench. Those are some of the bits that were made, that part of his telescopes that were made 60, 70, 80 years ago, not that. This bit, 60, 70, 80 years are just scraps. I don't know what happened to the main telescopes, they've all gone.
I suppose after World War II, it became possible very, very suddenly to make quite good instruments cheap, because of course things like lenses used in periscopes in submarines suddenly had no purpose. You could buy them for about £5. These were absolutely top quality lenses, and the equipment used by what they call WD, War Department reject material, suddenly made it possible for all kinds of people to put decent-ish instruments together.
Although many amateur astronomers chose to buy sophisticated mirrors and lenses, when it came to making their telescopes, they were more inventive, like Reg Spry.
This is the first telescope I made. The mirrors were made professionally. I don't play about making mirrors, it's too difficult. But here you've got a couple of shells out of the larder, a half shaft from a car, the viewfinder, that was made from the optics taken from an old pair of binoculars that had seen better days. That is a piece of loo plumbing. These are the tops of some coffee jars. It doesn't have to be enclosed. See, this flap covers the mirror, and then in here there's another little mirror that sends the view through here.
You need a lot of complicated tools to put this together, I suppose.
Oh, no. Just 4 tools I'll use for that, which I'll show you upstairs presently.
Oh, God, yes.
Yes.
Even now, many British enthusiasts have followed in Reggie's footsteps.
And this telescope I've made, it's a long time ago. To make this telescope and all the parts, probably about 3 weekends. It's made from aluminium sheeting rounded off. The stand is sewer pipe. This is a part of a police no waiting sign. These are weights to counteract this telescope, to balance it. And these are brake drums filled up with concrete. Since I've been here, the trees all around have got taller, there's extra sheds put up. So I really want to raise this telescope higher and higher. So I've made it onto this box, and I can actually raise this box by using these car jacks. I have 2 car jacks here, which I can turn and raise the telescope up. These can be turned very slowly. I can raise the telescope up a further 1 foot. This box can go up slowly to try and clear some of the trees.
The British amateur astronomer's horizon didn't stop at telescope making. The 1950s economic boom meant British people had more money and more leisure time. For the modern back garden astronomer, this meant they could also afford to build their own observatories, as Paul Doherty showed Patrick Moore.
Well, it is nothing more than a box, of course, but it serves its purpose in that it protects the telescope from the weather.
Well, it's pretty heavy, and it looks a bit dangerous as it swings back.
Yes, you need to know what you're doing with
I
it.
imagine you do. Well, it works beautifully, Paul, but one thing I do notice, and that is that the roof is still vertical, and surely that must cut off part of the sky.
It does, actually. I'm not too worried about it. The southern sky is the most important part for me, and eventually I will get some large counterweights fitted up on that to make the whole thing lighter, and eventually it will fold right back.
I see.
The custom of giving your telescope a good home continues to this day. Though for some, like Roger Steer from Bristol, camouflaging it in a garden shed is the preferred option.
Yes, I mean, it's technically an observatory. I built it because I found I was taking so long to set up my telescope when I wanted to go out and observe that I thought if I had a building where my telescope was housed, I could just open it up and I would be there observing straight away. Of course, this caused me a problem because my garden floods in the winter on occasion, so I had to build myself an island before I built it. So I built myself an island and then put the shed, as you call it, on top of it. The roof slides back, opens up and reveals the sky so I can observe.
Wiltshire-based fantasy writer Terry Pratchett has gone for something more upmarket. His state-of-the-art observatory, called the TARDIS, is the fulfilment of a lifelong dream. It also has a more practical purpose.
I think I decided to have an observatory built when I just got fed up with having my toes frozen off. The best viewing nights are inevitably cold nights in the winter. And when you have a telescope on a tripod, you have to get things set up, you have to run electrical leads across the lawn, and you have to mess about a bit. And then, just as you've got it right, it starts to rain or the cloud comes up. And I was just getting so fed up with being cold. You know, I could always tell what was going to happen because the gritting lorry would go past on the road. And frankly, freezing to death was beginning to spoil the fun. Well, the dome is ash. It was made for me by a superb boat builder who treated it as a kind of upturned boat. We had to solve all the problems as we went along. I think there's some skateboard wheels in here somewhere. Getting the motor, that took a bit of doing. All kinds of strange calculations that we had to do about wind speeds up here in case the top of the dome came off. It was really a case of making it up as we went along, but making it up out of very good materials, I have to say.
Comfortable observatories like Terry Pratchett's meant amateur astronomers could put in long nights of stargazing as they hunted for new discoveries. Indeed, many wanted to emulate George Alcock, the hero of the modern amateur tradition. He was a schoolteacher who made the news in 1983 when he spotted a comet from his Peterborough home.
Soon after the British scientists found the comet, the amateur astronomer Mr. George Alcock from Peterborough also saw it. Comets are called after the first 3 people to see them independently. Mr. Alcock was the 3rd, so it will be called the Iras-Akari-Alcock comet.
George saw the comet as he passed by his landing window with his binoculars.
Yes, this was the mat I was kneeling on. I came and put my wife, she was sleeping in that bed there. Well, not sleeping, I didn't put her to bed. I just walked across here, took hold of these, and in a matter of, well, it couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes, I was kneeling down here, and lo and behold, there it was.
So this was Iras-Akari-Alcock?
That's it, that's the one. That was the one that was found here. The big one. Well, it was. It was a small comet, but it had to be big because it was near.
When Alcock made a discovery, he'd phoned Guy Hurst of the British Astronomical Association, who'd verify it with his own telescope. Guy remembers these calls only too well.
It was very exciting because I get a lot of false alarms, as I've already said, and to actually know that somebody with that reputation is ringing me is pretty exciting, because you're going to go outside and perhaps be only the 2nd person in the world to see a new comet. In fact, I do remember one particular incident where he discovered a comet that was fairly bright in binoculars, was overhead, and the whole world had missed it. And we to this day, it's difficult to know why it got there without anybody noticing it earlier. But to actually be the sort of 2nd person in observing it is a very, very exciting moment, really.
George Alcock discovered a total of 5 comets and 5 novae in his lifetime. It was an astonishing achievement, possible only after years of memorising tens of thousands of stars.
Even now, his name is just revered. You know, he knew the night sky better than anybody else, probably anybody who's ever lived, to be honest. I think his trick was that the observing became a nightly ritual. You know, like most people say, they will, lesser mortals, dare I say, they will sit down at night and they will switch on Coronation Street, or they will switch on EastEnders. With him, it was like that. It was night time, he went out. But it was just a ritual. It was, you didn't think about what you were going to eat, you didn't think about what you were watching on television. You got home from school, it got dark, you went out with your binoculars. And so, and of course he'd spent 6 years memorising the night sky. So there was no way anybody could compete with him. Nobody else was in that league.
Alcock's dogged commitment to astronomy earned him an MBE, and later, on his death, Peterborough Cathedral took the rare step of dedicating a plaque to him. His work set the benchmark for serious amateurs who were struggling to make discoveries in the face of professional, government-funded research centres, like the radio observatory at Jodrell Bank near Manchester. Expensive technology allowed space researchers to probe deeper and deeper into space, an area out of reach for the amateur. But Alcock's work proved that back garden observers still had a role to play.
Without the modern amateur astronomer, the professionals they'd be able to do their major work, but what they wouldn't be able to do is what you might call constantly survey the skies for comets, for double stars, for variable stars, for things of that sort. Quite simply because most professional outfits actually have funding for very specific high-profile projects. Let's say the gas clouds in nebulae and things of that sort, or work done by Hubble. They don't have funding for the routine monitoring of the heavens. And for this, frankly, they need people who don't need paying.
So I think the sort of amateurs really come into their own in a way because of that. But if professionals are having to wait several years to get telescope time in Tenerife or Chile or wherever, the great thing about the amateur, he could just walk outside the back door and observe without waiting the 2 years, because if it's something new in the sky, it may be too late to wait that time.
For example, let me give one example. There are things called supernovae, exploding stars, in very distant galaxies, millions of light years away. We want to find these things early because it's very important to catch them in the early stages. And amateurs have a very fine record here. They discover these by the dozen. They look round, and professionals can't do that.
Tom Bowles is president of the British Astronomical Association and a leading figure in supernovae work.
My real passion is supernova, and I think it's the sheer scale of supernova that really attracts me. Explosions are huge, they're ginormous explosions. Their distances are great. We're looking at distance of 100 million light years away, and I can see them from my back garden, and that's terrific. This first image here is the master image of the galaxy. On this side, we can see the same galaxy retaken just recently, and you'll see that there's a new star appeared just at the fringe of the galaxy, and that is a new supernova.
The amateurs' contribution has proved so useful, it's marked a turning point in their history. With their profile raised, they've been able to develop a special relationship with professional astronomers.
We had an example in the Beagle programme where there was amateur information which was very valuable to us, although unfortunately we could do nothing about it. When we were heading towards Mars when we were hoping to arrive at what was called the end of the dust storm season. Well, amateurs have watched the dust on Mars for years. In fact, we were told on December the 22nd, the dust storm season is lasting longer this year than it had any time in the 400 years of records that we have since the telescope was invented. So they were watching a record. You know, most professionals don't watch things like that anymore. They're looking further afield.
Beagle 2 captured the public's imagination in the same way other events like Halley's Comet and the recent solar eclipse did. But not all space stories which excite readers and journalists are so benign. Amateur astronomer Peter Birtwistle helps track asteroids that might hit the Earth. He's one of hundreds of worldwide nighttime observers collecting data on the trajectory of near-Earth objects.
Effectively, if a near-Earth object comes by, we try and follow it so that we can predict where it's going to go in the future and try and predict whether it will potentially hit the Earth. And so far, so good. There was an occasion a year and a half ago where there was an asteroid and the initial prediction was that it could hit the Earth the next day. It was about, I think it was 30 hours time. And you go to work and, oh, do you have a good night observing last night? Well, yes, but there's an asteroid that might hit us tomorrow. It's some very strange thoughts. You just resign yourself to trying to find out whether anybody's observed it and whether they can refine the prediction. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
You're very philosophical.
You can only be like that, really. You can't worry too much about it.
Peter, like most amateur astronomers, has two jobs. A software architect by day, he's out in his fiberglass observatory at night, whatever the weather.
I'm trying to see whether we're going to get any usable weather. So I've got an animation of the satellite pictures, try and spot any clear sky. Not looking too good. There are a couple of breaks, but nothing very long, I suspect.
Cloud is the perpetual enemy of the British amateur, but it's their gritty determination to overcome both this and a lack of sleep which sets them apart from the professional.
I'll try and get some sleep from packing the telescope up to actually leaving for work. And during the night, it depends on what's there and what you're trying to image. But if you've got you may be imaging one object for maybe half an hour or 3/4 of an hour, so you know that, and you try and catnap for that time. And as soon as that one's finished, there's beeps and sounds that try and wake you up.
Peter's observatory is more than just an alarm clock. It contains thousands of pounds worth of technology, from computers to imaging cameras. And it's this equipment which has helped revolutionise amateur astronomy.
The availability of technology, which is relatively cheap technology, has been crucial in modern amateur work with the digital revolution. CCD cameras, pocket calculators at first, then computers of varying degrees of sophistication, then of course computer-monitored telescopes, and all of them getting cheaper all the time. And in the same way that it was possible to have a telescope cheaper in 1900 than in 1860, so now you can have all the state-of-the-art computing and all kinds of multi-facilities vastly cheaper than would have been possible in 1975.
Martin Moberly lives in Suffolk with his 4 telescopes. He's taken early retirement to become a full-time astronomer and writer, and is among a growing number of amateurs fully to embrace this new technology.
I like to have telescopes set up, focused and ready to go. There is nothing worse than suddenly finding it's beard in a discovery and you've got to think, oh, I had that telescope in the wrong configuration. I've got to change those lenses, switch that over, put another camera on the end. I like everything to be set up, so I have a telescope specifically for comets, galaxies, deep sky objects, and another one purely for planets, and that works really well. This is my 10-inch Newtonian, f6.3, and it's ideal for planets. It's the one I use for purely imaging the moon and planets, but for looking at planets you have to assess the atmospheric seeing. That's how turbulent the atmosphere is, so you're looking through 20 miles of atmosphere and everything is scintillating, but now and again you get very calm conditions when the atmosphere is stable at the ground level and at the jet stream level, and under those conditions the views of the planets are absolutely mind-blowing, and that's when I use this telescope a lot. I don't know any amateur astronomer who doesn't own a hairdryer, simply because when it is very humid in the UK, and it nearly always is every night, as soon as the temperature drops, dew forms on everything. As you know, if you go out to your car in the morning, it's absolutely covered with dew, or in winter with ice even. And you've got to get rid of that dew somehow, and the best way is simply a hairdryer. And that is that apart from getting electrocuted using it in the dark and damp, there's really, it's just about the best accessory any amateur can possess. You couldn't observe without a hairdryer because of all the dew formation. Right, well this is the observatory of my main Celestron 14 on a Paramount ME mounting, and it's the #1 instrument here. It's the most powerful instrument and it's robotically controlled. The cables from here go under the lawn, travel about 130 feet into the study where I control the telescope remotely throughout the winter nights. This mounting is the best amateur mounting in the world, bar none. Every amateur really wants one of these. I'm a very proud owner of it. Essentially I use this telescope with this S-Big CCD camera for imaging faint things, really faint, comets, galaxies, supernovae, novae. And the images go down the cable about 130 foot into the computer in the house. The telescope is also robotically controlled from inside the house as well, so I can swing it around wherever I want to without actually coming outside, apart from rolling back the shed and putting it back in place.
This kind of technology has enabled a new type of amateur to emerge in recent years. Described as pro-ams, they're observers like Martin who are producing work to extremely high standards. And it's thanks to the quality of new high-street digital imaging equipment that they can do this.
You can even use a webcam, believe it or not, for taking pictures of the planets that are as good as professionals could take more than 10 years ago before Hubble was launched. There's all this computing power at our disposal. You can take thousands of images of a planet over a few minutes. You can process them on a computer and it will stack and align them and give you a better picture than any professional was getting before about the mid-1990s. So that extra processing power has given amateurs the ability to contribute even more. Of course, the professionals still stay a bit ahead because they've got Hubble and huge telescopes. But I think that the amateurs have just moved with the times, as they always have done.
The digital revolution has undoubtedly launched amateur astronomy into a new orbit, but it's not to everyone's taste. Some traditionalists, like retired railway engineering manager John Meacham, still prefer to keep things simple.
I call myself an agricultural astronomer. I'm a low-tech man, you see. I know you can have all this gear, but in my opinion, there's nothing like using simple equipment, which is easy to operate and easy to set up, and then I can get on and do my observing and my drawing. I need to move with looking at variable stars, which I should be looking at later on. I need to move with a telescope or the binoculars from one star field to another fairly quickly. because in one night I might get through as many as 30 variable stars, and that's a very important thing. Now, I don't want to waste time fiddling about with a laptop or the go-to equipment and that sort of. I know it has its place in astronomy. CCD equipment and high-tech is splendid, but in my opinion, there's nothing like simple equipment and looking directly at the sky, and that gives me a real kick, that does.
John's passion for astronomy doesn't stop at looking through a telescope. It's a fertile subject for his other love, painting.
Well, it's all part of the same thing in a way, really. I mean, I look at the sky, I make observations of the planets and of comets, Comet Matcholz, which is near the pole star at the moment. I get ideas from NASA space probes, from images and photographs that are sent back by spacecraft that have circled round a comet and given us an idea of what it looks like. But I suppose really a good deal of what I do is imaginative. I mean, it's based upon fact, but it's also got to be artistically right, you see, it's another thing. I mean, I see astronomy as an all-embracing subject. It embraces all the sciences. It embraces physics, mathematics, art as well, painting, poetry. Thomas Hardy, for example, the great writer, the writer of The Mayor of Casterbridge, was actually an amateur astronomer, and he wrote a book called Two on a Tower, which is well worth reading, which is about an amateur astronomer who's interested in variable star observing.
The creator of the Discworld universe, novelist Terry Pratchett, also owes his inspiration to astronomy.
I got into science fiction by way of astronomy. That's what really happened. What I discovered first of all were the tea cards. And I was looking at the night sky, and I found a few astronomy books, good old Patrick's, certainly, a couple of his. But I got into science fiction because it had planets and stars and galaxies in it. It's got lots of other stuff as well. I mean, science fiction shouldn't be defined by that. I think it's also true, though, that people that are very interested in how the universe works tend to be a fertile ground for science fiction readers. I don't just mean, you know, the full-on fans, but the people who read science fiction as part of a, you know, wide reading diet.
All right, I'll tell you what. Listen to this.
Thanks to amateur astronomers, the secrets of the universe are now becoming less science fiction and more science fact. While most of us settle down to another evening on the sofa, you can be sure that this small band of unpaid workers will be getting ready for another night shift.
I'm having immense difficulty finding Saturn at the moment. It's over there, you can see it with the naked eye, but at just this moment, I cannot pick it up in the main telescope, and it's really annoying me.